Buonasera a tutte, buonasera a tutti. Siamo molto felici questa sera di introdurvi l'ospite che già vedete al centro dell'inquadratura. Per dirlo in inglese, The Day has come. Abbiamo infatti con noi Kenneth Goldsmith che interloquirà con noi con il nostro, almeno con il mio pessimo inglese, a broken English, I'd say, di tante cose. Io direi, Gabriele, che immediatamente possiamo switchare all'inglese in modo che il nostro ospite capisca. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this new episode. This is the first episode of Semio Boomer completely in English. So, again, forgive me personally for my broken English. I say this, first of all, to our special guest today, which is not only a guest, but is also a Christmas present for us, because Kenneth Goldsmith is a lot of things. He is an intellectual, of course, a professor, a poet. If you search for him in his Wikipedia page in English, you will find a lot of interesting things, and a photograph of him doing a reading for President Obama. I don't think he did a reading for President Trump too, but we can ask him, but I don't think so. And we will see if he will speak for President Biden too, but anyway, this is a question maybe for later. I had to be honest, Gabriele introduced me the first time to the work of Goldsmith in a more in-depth way, So I give Gabriele the honor to present him in a good way, and I'm very happy because it's a very special day for us. So Gabriele, I give you the floor.
Grazie Bruno, I switch to English as well. Kenneth, thanks a lot for being here. If you want, you can say hello to our audience.
Ok, sono molto felice di essere qui con voi. Il mio italiano rotto.
Like my English, as my English.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That's, yeah,
So this is a broken conversation, we can say.
absolutely.
Absolutely, yes.
Conversazione rotto.
Conversazione rotta, sì.
Fragments of a lover's discourse, to quote a very famous book by Roland Barthes. But I'm very happy because Kenneth is for me personally, is like a living legend. When I was younger than now and I discovered this body of work, I always said to me, yes, I want to do something like that. I want to do stuff like that. As Bruno said, Kenneth now is in New York, where he lives, where he was born. Kenneth is a poet, he's a writer, he's an author, he's a theorist, he's a teacher, he's an organizer of stuff, of a lot of stuff, and which is the core of our dialogue today, is the creator of UbuWeb. So we are focusing on UbuWeb, and you can see the cover of his latest book, published by Columbia University Press, which is entitled Duchamp is My Lawyer. So he's an awarded poet. Kenneth printed out the internet, which is the title of a beautiful project of his. As Bruno said, he spoke before Obama at the White House while celebrating American poetry. He edited the interviews of Andy Warhol and the emails of
Hillary Clinton.
Of Hillary Clinton. He taught students how to waste their time on the internet and to make art out of it, and how not to be creative in order to be creative today. So he's a very interesting figure, and we are very happy to host him today. We talk with Kenneth starting from this book, which is called Duchamp is My Lawyer, which is the story, the philosophy, and the auto-analysis, I'd say, of UbuWeb. I will immediately give the floor to Kenneth in order to make him talk. UbuWeb, for those who are listening to us and are not familiarized with such an incredible work, is the largest archive of experimental art on the internet. As Kenneth says in the introduction of the book, it's like the back door of the arts. It's like the Robin Hood of the avant-garde. And it's a really huge and historical website, which was launched by Kenneth way back in 1996. Personally, I discovered UbuWeb because I was searching for essays, writings about futurist music. I think it was mid-2000s, and I found the very beautiful essays by Daniele Lombardi, composer and music critic who passed away in 2018. And then I always found out about UbuWeb in everything I did. So it was a kind of intrusive but beautiful presence in everything I tried to do, to study, to make, etc. So, Kenneth, we have to start with a really silly, really banal and simple question, but we cannot skip that. So, can you tell us how actually you started UbuWeb? How did it started?
Well, it started as a site for visual and concrete poetry. And that, for those who don't know, was a little obscure mid-century poetry movement that used words as images. And I just began scanning some old concrete poems and putting them up on the web. And they looked really good. When they were in the book, they looked kind of dead and old and sort of sad, you know, like many things did. But when they were put up on the web, illuminated by the screen, they look new and fresh again, almost as if they were made for the medium of the internet, because they were multimedia poems anyway, at least in theory. So when they actually got put onto multimedia, they actually became what they were intended to be. So the site just began as a little site for concrete poems, and I kind of, 1996, I sent a few emails out to a few friends. I said I put a few concrete poems on the web, and they liked it, so I put more, and they told their friends, and I put more. And before I knew it, I had a little circle of friends that like concrete poetry and a little website. This was all very new at the time. And then when sound came, I began to put up sound poetry, which is similar to concrete poetry, except it uses words as music rather than words as carriers of semantic meaning. And that went really well for a little while. We used a technology then called real audio, which was a mistake. But so before long, maybe 2 or 3 years later, I had a little archive of sound poetry and concrete poetry. And then what happened was I was ripping LPs and CDs. And I ripped an LP of John Cage where he's doing sound poetry with an orchestra. And I thought, well, this isn't really sound poetry, but it's not really orchestral music either. I said, but I want to put it on because it relates. And I thought, oh, this is a problem. At that point, I put it up and I just decided maybe we should just call this avant-garde instead of sound poetry. And that opened up the gate to a whole problem of what is avant-garde. And then the website began focusing on the avant-garde, which, by the way, was a term, that was really out of favor, still out of fashion. Avant-garde stands for patriarchy, colonialism, militarism, all sorts of bad things. But I kind of like the idea of taking a term that was disused and then reimagining it, what it could be. In other words, turning it kind of upside down. And I thought back to when I was younger in the 1980s, AIDS activists took the Nazi pink triangle that was put on gay prisoners and they turned it upside down and it became a symbol of activism. I thought maybe we could do something similar with the avant-garde. Maybe we could turn it upside down and redeploy the term in ways that weren't colonialist or racist or militaristic, but in fact embraced all of those sort of queernesses that really were not a part of the avant-garde, that were not permitted into it. So, UberWeb is an impure archive. And I think the impurity is really important. You have figures like Sun Ra, Alice B. Toklas, outsiders, Adolf Wolfe, all these people that were sort of on the margins, Jack Smith of the avant-garde, but were never quite let in. And we also have all the old-fashioned white guys as well, the Picassos and all the heavy, Jackson Pollock, all those bad guys too. And what's great is when they mix together, when Sun Ra begins to dialogue with Jackson Pollock. That's the moment we look for, is where things really explode. So that's the sort of some story.
Well, so I'm very interested in this idea of the archive, because if we open UberWeb, we immediately see something which, at least visually, seems to be a kind of old manner hypertext, but then we explore it and there is a cornucopia of references, so we immediately experience a sort of living archive. But anyway, it is an archive, which is an old tool of the internet. Nowadays, people, at least in the common way, use the internet more with the logic of the flow. So there is the social internet, the social media. So also in the structure of the website, I think there is the strong component of a aesthetic, political, maybe also in the good sense ideological manifesto. Do you agree with this lecture of UbuWeb or not?
Absolutely. UbuWeb is very old-fashioned. I don't think people make those kind of archives anymore. I think you're actually perfectly right when you say it's a flow and it's a social media. There are artifacts that are distributed all over the place. Mm-hmm. And there's an assumption, which is false, that those artifacts will always be there. And see, this is where the archive becomes really important, because actually, now you watch what happened yesterday is Facebook will begin to be broken up and spun off, and maybe somebody else will buy Instagram and commercialize it and change it in ways that archive is no longer available, or commodify it, in ways that are unpleasant. It's an illusion to think that the internet is forever, and this is why it's important to stay independent, like the web was originally, and not buy into big corporations like Instagram or Facebook or Google or any of those things, because they're really not interested in you. You're just a way to have them make a profit, and your participation is what keeps their stock price high. Yeah. UbuWeb is completely independent, and we've made mistakes. As I said, we learned early on with real audio that when we connect up to something that's commercial, that went out of business, and everything that we did was no longer available. So it's still possible in the social network to be independent. It doesn't, just because Facebook and Twitter feel like the internet and Instagram feels like the internet, it doesn't mean that the old internet has stopped existing. Mm-hmm. It actually works just as well as it always did. The problem is that we have forgotten that it's still possible to do anything independently without money. And UbuWeb is run for 25 years with no money. It's possible, like the old days, to make a website without €1 million. And people just, have forgotten that. And I think that's a shame. When I started, you had to learn HTML. And the UbuWeb is still written in HTML 1.0 on the same templates that I wrote in 1996. If I put something up yesterday, it's the same exact file, the same exact format. And there's, and it works. People forget, people say, I have to have €1 million in order to make a website. I need great government support. I need funding, please fund me. We say no. We don't take funding from anyone. Somebody could offer me €1 million tomorrow to fund UbuWeb, and I'd say, fuck you. UbuWeb is independent. I don't want your money, because then you can tell me what to do. I don't want to be told what to do. You can't buy UbuWeb. Impossible.
Well, this is very, very close also to the ideas of the free software movement. I recap idea from Richard Stallman, Linus Torvalds, and so on. Maybe also that these persons. I know them because I knew them on the books. But maybe you had the occasion to meet them. I don't know.
I met Stallman in Genoa.
Okay.
At some conference, we were invited together, and he's absolutely insane.
I love him. I love him.
He's the craziest person I've ever met.
I love him. Please, Gabriele.
I love Richard Stallman. So
I love Richard Stallman. I love him, and I love his ideas. It's fine. This is what the internet was, and it's what the internet still can be. You just have to remember that it's possible. It's not so hard. I'm not a programmer. It's not so hard to write an HTML document and FTP it to a server. Wow.
Yeah. This idea of, for example, working on the very same TXT pad file, and that you write all the code in HTML by yourself, makes me think of some stuff that Florian Kramer wrote a long time ago about the code as a performance. I think that there is also this component in what you do, and in this ideological, political, and aesthetical statement at the same time that you want UbuWeb to be free, independent, a kind of one-man band project, but at the same time a collective project which creates circles.
Yeah, well, I love Florian. I mean, he's one of our friends, and all of those guys involved in neoism. I mean, that's foundational. That's really important work. And I think Florian is one of the great theoreticians of the internet. Well, UbuWeb, it is. I don't know if it's so collective. It's kind of autocratic. And that's why it's so good. I'm sorry, but it's hard to get work on UbuWeb. The work has to be really, really good. According to what standard? According to what I think. And so it's a false archive. It's a false kind of democracy. It's open, but actually it's not that open. I think democracy in art is probably a bad idea. Though I believe that anything can be art after Marcel Duchamp, not anything can be good art. And most art is really bad, though I still think it's art. You really do need gatekeepers. You really do need somebody who has an aesthetic and knows what to do with it. And, this is, of course, probably very contrary to most political ideas. But if you don't have some kind of filtering system, you get the Internet Archive, okay, which I love, but it's a fucking mess, and there's no rhyme or reason. You can't find anything there. I mean, it's completely chaotic, which is beautiful in its own way, because I go onto the Internet Archive and I pull things off of it and repost them on Ubu so people can actually find them in context. And this goes back to the archive. I think it's important to have a point of view on an archive. Every archive is a statement, okay? And I just think that, I think the flow is a bit overrated. I think that we all live in the flow, but it's also meaningless. And sometimes you have to kind of step outside of the flow to create sort of a Benjaminian dialectical constellation in order to make a point. And in order to take a stance, because otherwise, if we don't take a stance, then the owners of the flow own us. Okay, so to make a political stance, you have to actually stop that flow, at least temporarily, and make a point. This is why I still write books. Otherwise, it's just all Facebook posts, and that means nothing. It really means nothing. In the end. So I think this is why we continue to make statements. And UbuWeb is a statement. It has to be a statement. That's why it's important. It's not just flow.
You raised a point which is key to me, and I wanted to ask a question about that, but you actually already answered. I think that UbuWeb as a selection, as a kind of upside down, but actually not so much canon. It reflects your taste. This is immediately clear to anybody. And I wanted to ask, which are the criteria for selecting or rejecting submission? Because, for example, I remember that we met via email because one day at night I wrote you an email asking something like that. Kenneth, tomorrow it's my birthday. Can you put a top 10 list of mine on your page of very famous people lists, because it would be the greatest gift of all for me. And actually you did it, but perhaps because the selection was good, I hope.
Well, I mean, I have a part of me that really, really would like to sort of be more open. And that gesture, I was like, oh, wow, this is like such a beautiful thing. The list was good. And somebody reached out and I was moved by it. I like that idea. I always had this idea to make top 10 list automated so people could put theirs in. But then I just end up getting like links to porn sites, and it would be a mess in a minute or political, people, links to Trump for president 2024. It would become a disaster in a minute if I did that. So you see the problem. I mean, I want to be open, but I don't take submissions anymore on UberWeb. You know how many bad submissions I received over the years? You know how many I took from the submissions and posted on Ubu? Maybe only one or two. I mean, there's so much fucking bad art out there, and everybody thinks they're a good artist. I couldn't do it. I don't have the bandwidth to do it anymore. I stopped it many years ago. So it's a conundrum, and I understand, it's a problem, but nobody can say, if I was taking grants, people would say, well, you must be more democratic. Well, we're going to withhold our funding if your site is not more diverse. You don't have enough Native American Indians on your site. We're going to not fund you. Now, one of the problems with the site is that we inherited a white male, Western European patriarchal canon. That's the fucking avant-garde. Okay, if you start from there and then you expand it. Naturally, you want to become more inclusive. You want to become more global. It's never too much. But for the reason that it's the right thing to do, not because if we don't do it, somebody is going to stop our funding. That's the wrong reason to do anything under threat. You do it because you love it and you want to expand and it's correct, the right thing to do. So to me, I think we want to operate out of love and good rather than fear and coercion. And this is why I don't take any money for UberWeb.
So maybe I can change just a little bit. I slightly change the focus because I'm also truly interested in one of the other things you worked on, which is the idea of creativity. You are quite famous because you teach a kind of methodology of uncreativity, so against the ideology of creativity, of innovation and so on, and really connected with the reality of new remake practices, of course really internet based, so the idea of cut and paste, copy and paste and so on and so forth. So if you can explain to us what does it mean to be creative starting from uncreativity?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, what passes for creativity is not creative at all. Hollywood, Man Booker Prize novels, pop music. I mean, that's all formulaic. They're the ones that are actually uncreative, but they won't admit it. So in order to reimagine what it would mean to be creative, you have to go against originality. You have to go against all the things that neoliberalist creative culture holds up as being really good. And that's plagiarism, that's fraudulence, that's insincerity, that's, being somebody who you're not, all sorts of things that, the internet made possible and still continues to make possible. So the problem with all that mainstream media is that it ignores the fact that it's actually being all written on computers and across media. And when you open up a book, like for the Man Booker Prize, it's a novel written from 1950, as if none of this exists. Yes, the characters use cell phones, but you'll never find a glitch in the novel. Never find a crash in the novel. There's no evidence at all. And so we want to continue on like it's, like the good old days, some kind of bizarre nostalgia for when everything was whole and everything was in perfect order. And these novels are nostalgic. And I also think these novels also seek to reify identity in a stable way. When the digital world has been working so far against stabilizing identity, I understand how important it is for certain people to stabilize their identity. They've been marginalized. I really understand that. But they need to become more complicated about the way in which they investigate and form identity through the digital. So I think this is why, I think the art world handled this very beautifully in the post-internet art movement, which says that once the medium becomes invisible, then it becomes really powerful. Okay, so when early net art always had to refer to the network and the browser. And then post-internet art actually used the methods of the internet, but didn't find any place the need to comment on them. They just simply assumed, like the air, that it's part of the way that we make art. So I think that I find a lot of the identitarian movements to be nostalgic and backward, really, when they have a great opportunity to reinvent what it means and probably reify and bolster inauthenticity as a portal to authenticity. I'm interested in this, uncreativity, unoriginal, inauthenticity as being truer, because I find with my students that what they select, you cannot get away from who you are. Everything you do has your impression on it. Everything you do has your taste. Artists try too hard to be expressive when we can't help but be expressive. Everything we do is expressive of ourselves. So that I find that with my students, what they choose tells me as much about their autobiography as an essay about their mother's cancer operation or something like that. They can't get away from it. So come on now. I mean, this is not such a difficult thing. Visual art has been doing it for 100 years, since Duchamp and Warhol and et cetera, et cetera. Music has been doing it. Hip hop is filled with inauthenticity, samples, unoriginality, riffs on other people, all sorts of complicated notions of identity. And yet the art that we're being served up is so simple and so reductive and some bizarre, and I find quite scary strain of populism. It reminds me of art from the 1930s, what we're seeing now. Mm-hmm. It's art for children. I think it's unfortunate.
Well, Gabriele, I think you understand as me that this idea of identity, authenticity, and tradition as a social construct is a very semiotic idea, and very, very. We agree with it. Let's say.
Yes, I was thinking the very same thing, because we wanted Kenneth to be part of our video interviews for two reasons. Because he did a lot of things that are beautiful per se, but these very things are so naturally semiotic and of semiotic interest. We already talked about intersemiotic translation, talking about concrete and sound poetry. That's our topic in our jargon, in our language. That is intersemiotic translation. And obviously this idea of identity is something so complex that has to do with pretending to be authentic and pretending to be a forgery and so on and so forth is really semiotic. I was just about to stimulate our audience exactly in this way. Kenneth, the motto, not the payoff, but yes, the motto of UbuWeb is all avant-garde all the time. Okay, what I really completely fell in love with while discovering UbuWeb from time to time is that, as you already mentioned and as you already said, this avant-garde may sound most of the times when you teach it, when you learn it at school, at university, something really like a medicine, something which is boring, which is annoying, which is not funny, which is a duty. They teach it to you, so that's the canon, and you cannot change it. What I completely immediately love, in a kind of recognizing something in an empathetic way, was exactly the idea that the avant-garde has to be something fun. You had to enjoy it. Because I love a lot Frank Zappa, and Frank Zappa all the time said he did not make art but entertainment. And also Umberto Eco, while commenting on his novel The Name of the Rose, said the very same things about postmodernism. He said that James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake and the worst and cheapest romance novel, they had the same goal. Yeah. They had to entertain the audience, the readers had to enjoy them. And I think that it's really evident in everything that you do. this component of having fun, playing, as in a vitalistic game, is really important. It's something prominent.
Yeah, I find it fun, and I find it funny. And certain artists on UberWeb, for example, People Like Us, who's the name of a woman named Vicky Bennett from England, who has put her entire oeuvre up on Ubu. I think at this point there's probably 100 albums and 40 films or so. Vicky thinks humor is really, really important. Negativland, let's say, Negativland found humor to be very important. Cage found humor to be very important. I think that in order to be interested in the avant-garde, you had to have something go really wrong in your life. Like the culture as it was presented to you wasn't working for you. And you had to question it, you had to have a crisis with culture. And you had to rethink it. And you had to say, well, what else is there? And happily, you start to look for something that is outside of that. And happily, there are all of these examples. So for me, it sort of saved my life, It made me feel, it made me feel, there were other people like myself, people like us out there. It wasn't, like in high school, let's say, I began, yeah, you're right. I mean, growing up in the 70s in New York, the first thing you find is not only punk, but you find people like Frank Zappa and the Mothers, and you go, okay, this is, and then Thelonious Monk, and it begins to open up from there. And there's this whole other canon, Sun Ra, all sorts of weirdos dressing up, making noise and having a lot of fun. And, to me, it was just something that was made me feel sane and comfortable. And I think UberWeb is just a community of people who don't fit in. If I can't say who the community really is, but when I meet people, I find they're like semioticians and electronic musicians and performance artists and avant-garde dancers and text artists and, academics who have dropped out of academia, musicians who have dropped out of the classical music world, all sorts of weirdos. And it's not the art world. The art world doesn't even know UberWeb exists, the proper art world. Sometimes I'll be, because I live in New York and my wife is an artist, and so we'll be at a very fancy benefit, for something, and I'll sit. I remember one time I was sitting next to a director from the Larry Gagosian Gallery, right? Biggest gallery in New York. And he says, what do you do? And I said, I run UberWeb. And he looked at me, he's like, what is that? I've never heard of it. You see, they have no need for it. They have their $1 million paintings and they have their, fine bottles of wine and their lovely thing. There's no need for it. So UberWeb is for people who need it. People who live maybe outside of city centers. I find a lot of people who are love culture but can't afford culture. Maybe they're at home with small children or minding elderly parents or working a job that doesn't permit them to get away or don't have the money to fly to New York and pay $25 to go to MoMA or get a hotel room in New York so that you can go to the Anthology Film Archive. It costs a shitload of money. So while those places are very important, I think you just have to understand that for most people that's impossible. And UberWeb is possible. And I really love the idea, the artifacts on Uber are not good. A lot of the films are like from bad VHS copies, bootleg things. Sometimes they're really, they're terrible. But I remember the theorist Hito Staro has written about the weak image, the poor image, why that's better. Because it's available. So the poor image becomes strong. The weak image becomes a strong image simply due to its democracy and its availability. And Hollywood, of course, and MoMA, which of course now cost a lot of money, become weaker because you can't access it. So she talks about, or Boris Groys also talks about these things, about the beauty of going to buy bootleg DVDs under a highway somewhere, which of course are bad quality, but they only cost €1. And that's the power of that. UberWeb really believes in that, And then if you're lucky enough and you have the privilege, then you can go to the great places and see them in their real thing. But quite frankly, Jack Smith films are not playing in Turin, where you are tonight. First of all, there's no movies anywhere anymore. Mm-hmm. But even if it was, how many times a year does a Jack Smith film play in Turin? Like never, right? Or once every 10 years.
I discovered Jack Smith thanks to John Zorn, for example. So.
Yeah, exactly. So that's all we have, and I'm glad we have it. So that's what UberWeb is for. So, it has a democratic idea in mind, even if it doesn't always meet up to it. It's a sort of a funny mixture of autocracy and democracy.
Yeah, I think I really appreciate this politics of and aesthetics of the marginalized, and I find very, very touchful this strong connection between the periphery of the web and the periphery of the physical geography. So in some way, the ancient dichotomy between virtual and reality is not so real. Something that is peripheric outside the internet, in some way finds a mirror in the internet, and I think UberWeb can represent the joining point between these two dimensions.
Well, the pandemic has given us the web. I wrote a book called Wasting Time on the Internet, which was a rebuttal to the notion that everybody says, oh, you're wasting too much time on the internet, come back to real life. Mm-hmm. Well, those arguments are finished now after the pandemic because everybody's on the fucking internet all the time. And you never read those articles anymore. Oh, my digital detox. Yeah. You see, I mean, I said this so many years ago, and now, of course, it's become true because everybody's living on the internet. Stop it. Stop trying to moralize the fucking internet. Yeah. Just get over it, please.
Yeah, it's fucking horrible, this pedagogy of the internet, and usually if you do this kind of pedagogy, you are one of the worst person in your personal behavior. So, but anyway, I have another question for you, because we know that the next year you are going to teach a class entitled Rip, Remix and Burn, Music as Poetry and Poetry as Music. So basically, if you would like to talk about this course, we hear you.
Well, I teach at a university, and they bring me in to just do weird things. That's my job. So I did teach a class called Wasting Time on the Internet, where 15 people just sat in a room. There was no agenda. We just sat at a table with our laptops and wasted time on the internet together. And it became incredible because I've never had a class that was that close. Somebody would be surfing the web and say, oh my God, look at this. And then suddenly it would go around the room and people would start laughing. I mean, it was this beautiful sort of almost like a yoga class, communal type of yoga class. Uncreative writing, again, the students come in, they must be unoriginal completely. So I do all of these kind of classes. So this one, I'm not entirely sure what it's going to be because I never have a syllabus. I never prepare anything. But this one, I think, I think it'll be something about lyrics as remixing lyrics, détournement of lyrics, search and replace. I'm not entirely sure yet. I actually, now that my semester is finished, I will actually consider what the hell I'm going to teach, but not too hard. I won't work too hard on that.
Kenneth, you mentioned a couple of times uncreative writing and wasting time on the internet, which were also translated in Italian by Einaudi and by Nero, not edition. So we have Perdere Tempo su Internet with a beautiful cat on the cover. And we've also Scrittura Non Creativa by Valerio Mattioli and the other guys from Not Nero. In the same atmosphere of working with these upside down ideologies that you try to really easily, without making a war about it, but trying to make this ideology of creativity, of newness upside down, and also trying to say that you can do stuff with the internet, so it's not a waste of time. You can be actually creative also in everyday life, and it's also, I think, a consistent consequence of the idea of uncreative writing, the fact that you can make something artistic out of the internet, and so on and so forth. You wrote a very beautiful long form for the New Yorker. I think it was 2013, and it was really funny because the picture was William Shakespeare riding Nyan Cat, and the title was "The Writer as Meme Machine," which is really interesting to me because I am interested in memes. We hosted Valentina Tanni, which is following us, ciao Valentina, with her book about the meme aesthetic. So why can today the writer be, and maybe should be, and we should conceive of writing as a kind of memetic production in your perspective?
Well, it goes back to the crisis that painting faced when photography arrived. And, up until that time, painting's primary mission was the representation of reality. Then came along a machine that was much better at representing reality than any human hand could do. So painting has this big crisis and says, how do I continue painting with this machine? So it frees it up and it begins to say, well, maybe I can do what the machine can't do. And so it goes into, say, Impressionism, where everything gets blurry and soft, because of course cameras today go blurry and soft, but at that point that was considered to be an error. So they said, let's take the error and exploit it and start making things blurry and mushy, which of course leads to Cézanne and fractured spaces of cubism, which leads into interior spaces of the head and surrealism and futurism, et cetera, et cetera. So writing never really had that crisis. Writing, modernist writing was imitative of painting's crisis. Gertrude Stein looked at Picasso and said, damn, that guy has a really good crisis. I'm going to try to write like a cubist. It didn't really work. Well, Gertrude Stein made beautiful work, undoubtedly, but I feel it was false. It wasn't an authentic crisis. So now fast forward 100 years later, and we have now machines that are much better at writing than we are. And so what then is the role of the writer? And I think this is becoming much more exaggerated with the advent of artificial intelligence, where, machines are actually capable of writing things that humans once wrote. I was once at a conference in Berlin, and I met this man who was a computer scientist, and it was incredible. He could take a whole set of statistics and feed it into his machine, and it would come out as perfect English prose. So he would take statistics from a sporting event, and he'd feed them in, and the whole thing would spit out a newspaper article about it as if it was written by a person. Okay? And then I gave my presentation about uncreative writing, and he couldn't possibly understand why I would want to write like a machine. Why would I want to do that which he was actually trying to make his machine do? And here's the difference, is that he was trying to solve a problem. And as an artist, I was trying to make a problem. And that, of course, he couldn't understand. So when art tries to solve problems, it really fails. Art is very good at asking questions, not giving answers.
And talking about questions, you guys in the audience, if you have any questions, it's now or never for Kenneth. We started we started our dialogue by introducing the fact that you really recently published Duchamp is My Lawyer, which is a statement, a political, aesthetical, also financial statement about what UbuWeb is about. We didn't say that it's a very beautiful book, but we read it, so we suggest it to our audience. And it's really full of, it's like a theoretical manifesto, it's like a methodological manifesto, and it's full of anecdotes and really interesting things that we didn't know about UbuWeb. It's a kind of exegesis comment on some specific aspects of UbuWeb.
Also behind the scenes, I'd say, in some way.
Also behind the scenes, definitely. And the book closes with the 101 things on UbuWeb that Kenneth likes the most, which is a common question that he was asked about all over the years. So it's a really beautiful book, and it's really readable, enjoyable, and it's full of complex stuff and very funny stuff, as always in Kenneth's writing. So Kenneth, I wanted to ask you one specific thing about the polemics, we can say, related to UbuWeb, because we didn't say it because we know UbuWeb, but maybe someone in the audience does not. So UbuWeb is completely free, is completely open access, is completely copyleft as an ideology of publishing things. So you can download everything, and everything is put on UbuWeb without any permission asked before. Also because a lot of stuff is really old, so there is no copyright, etc. But what I wanted to ask you is which are the most, the strangest cases of lawsuit or take down notice that you received for UbuWeb? Because I think that, and you talk about it in the book, I think that you faced a lot of situations like that. So people asking to take down stuff from UbuWeb because they were the owner of the copyrights or something like that.
Yeah, I have to say that most people claiming copyright are full of shit. And if you make them prove it, they can't prove it. They often don't own the copyright to the thing that they are claiming. Oftentimes, the thing that they are claiming copyright for has no copyright on it, at least according to US law, which I know. A lot of times, people are just trying to shake you down for some money. A lot of times, people are simply trying to hassle you. 99% of the claims that I receive on UbuWeb are fraudulent. Sometimes they're written by machines, as we were talking about before, artificial intelligence. They're just automated takedown notices that just kind of keep coming. So when, I learned a lot in 2009 when the MP3 file sharing wars were going on, mega upload wars and all of that stuff. All somebody had to do was send a cease and desist to your blog, to your MP3 blog, asking you, saying that they're the copyright owner and they're going to sue you if you don't take down your avant-garde free jazz cassette tape from 1982. And I saw a whole system, beautiful ecosystem eradicated because people didn't understand copyright. It's scary to get a takedown notice, but it doesn't mean you're getting sued. Usually in US law, a takedown notice, a DMCA takedown notice is an invitation to conversation, at which point you can push back. And usually if you push back, they won't even answer you because they're just blanketing the internet with takedown statements, and hopefully they'll accomplish what they want without spending a single cent. So most copyright claims are bogus, and I go into this in the book about how you can tell a fraudulent copyright claim and what to do about it, really. UbuWeb has never been sued. We've never asked for permission for anything, and we've never even come close to being sued. So something tells me that it's a lot of bullshit going on out there. You need to get smarter about it. You need to push back a little bit. You have a right to push back, and you should.
So I see we have a question in our chat, so maybe we can use this question to finish our wonderful conversation. Niccolò asks, Hi Kenneth, to question about Katie Acker. You included her in your archive, so I hope it doesn't veer off too much from the discussion. How do you think she matters for the creative/uncreative opposition you were talking about? How can her appropriation and rewriting, like with Cervantes or Dickens, be important to play with the boundaries between and within different arts and works of art?
Yeah, Acker is key. I mean, she was really one of the first people out there to actually proclaim herself as being a plagiarist, which I think in the time, I think in the 70s when she was doing that, or maybe the early 80s, I think it was very, very controversial that somebody would actually say, I am a plagiarist. You see, here's the problem. The problem is all we do is we open up the newspaper and there's another person caught for being a plagiarist, a novelist. And they have to go on all the talk shows and they have to, go on Oprah and they have to beg for forgiveness. And they say, I'm so sorry, mea culpa and all of this stuff. Whereas Kathy Acker gave us the tool to say that actually copying something is another writing tool and a legitimate writing tool. I mean, Burroughs hinted at it with cut-ups a little bit, but Acker was actually the first person to actually begin to explore inauthenticity and uncreativity as a practice. Now, she took little bits, I think, she actually just stepped into it. And this is not talked about very often because people like, it's bad stuff, it's illegal. People say, well, this is against the law. They like to talk about Kathy Acker as being the great punk rocker and being the alt embodiment of downtown New York, sort of a hero in the sort of Lower East Side scene. Okay, all of that is true. But technically, her entry into plagiarism was the inspiration. And we did a book called Against Expression, an anthology of conceptual writing, and Kathy Acker was right there front and center. So she's fucking brilliant, absolutely.
Thank you. Gabriele, I don't know is there any other question? Do you see?
Actually, I guess not.
Okay.
But thank you, Niccolò, because your question was really
on the point. Yeah.
Listen, when everything is copyable on the internet, to claim that anything is yours is a lie. The minute you put something on the internet, it's no longer yours. It doesn't belong to you, and that's why Richard Prince, with his very controversial Instagram appropriations, was so smart. He said, actually, you don't own your photographs. They're really not your photographs. They're just fodder for a machine that makes a lot of money, and there's nothing you can do about this, and I can take your fucking personal photo, and I may hurt your feelings, but I have every legal right to do that. If it's on the internet, it's fair game. If you don't want it copied, don't put it on the internet. And there's a lot of reasons to do that, to not put things on the internet. There's a whole other argument, against what the internet can't do. And because the internet can do so much, maybe we start to now ask the questions, so what are the things that the internet can't do? And why are they valuable? Like pottery, like a ceramic pot. The internet still can't make a ceramic pot. That's interesting. Organic locavore food. You can't. You can order a chicken on the internet, but you can't eat a chicken on the internet. Mm-hmm. These are the sort of questions I think that become interesting in a post-internet time.
This is very, very close to what Sacha Baron Cohen said in the famous speech at the Anti-Defamation League, related to the fact that your images, your photographs, your face in some way immediately becomes property of multinational and private owners, and also can immediately become a tool for racism, racist discourses, and so on and so forth. So we are in a pretty bad situation, I think, and I think this is also the reason why UbuWeb it's a treasure in this land of shit we are living in.
I just want to push back, though. It's not. It's a time then to embrace the inauthenticity, the surveillance, the fact that you are owned corporately. It's time not to, I mean, yes, we can say it's bad, but I think it's also an opportunity for us to become the sort of robots that we are becoming. And if you're not embracing that in a complicated way, you're probably not living in the 21st century.
I agreed, and it's a paradox, and I agree because it's a way to hack this system. So I agree also with you, of course.
It's nothing new. Post-humanism has been with us for 30 years. Nothing is new. All of this stuff, and this is the last thing I'm going to say because I know we have to add. All of the digital can be found in modernism. So all of the kind of theory of deconstruction, the theory of structuralism, the theory of the collective unconscious, everything then was just a staging ground for the actualization of those ideas in the digital moment. If you want to understand the internet, you must understand modernism. And that's all. Modernism was made only for the digital. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you, Kenneth.
Ciao.
Thank you, Kenneth.
This is a kind of teleological interpretation of modernism, which is really interesting because it's like a preparation for what we have today, in a sense.
I mean, it's all there. Modernism didn't exist, nor did postmodernism. It only was a rehearsal for the 21st century. Okay.
Kenneth, just a last question from the chat because people are waking up.
Last one, okay.
The last one, and we let you go. And thanks a lot for everything. It was super interesting and super funny. A guy in the audience asks if you have some glitchy novels that you read in recent times that you suggest, something which is glitchy in the very nature of the text that you read.
No. Absolutely not. It hasn't been done. I say to the person who asked the question to write that novel, it doesn't fucking exist. And I'm like, why doesn't it exist? Okay?
Maybe
it's ridiculous. You think everything has been done in art and literature. It hasn't. There's one thing. When we had glitch in music, in the 90s, you had Migo records from Vienna, beautiful glitch music. Okay. All sorts of like scratching in hip hop. All sorts of technological error in every other art form except for fucking literature. And the person who asked the question, I'm expecting them to write that book. Let's go.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Kenneth. Okay. So, Gabriele, if you want, you can say hello to Kenneth.
Okay, ciao.
Kenneth, thanks a lot for everything. It was super fun.
Yeah.
We have to do that again in a few months. I don't know.
Yeah. Next time we do it, we'll be sitting, having a glass of wine at a cafe together.
Hopefully.
Let's hope so.
Okay.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye. Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you. Gabriele, Kenneth ci ha salutato. Io rimuovo la sua immagine che è rimasta così. Noi siamo ancora in diretta.
Sì.
Quindi ci allargo un pochino.
Oggi è tutto dada.
Sì, Duchamp è il nostro lawyer, giusto?
Esatto.
Sei contento, Gabriele?
Ma sì, caro Bruno, di solito questo debrief lo facciamo off camera, ma oggi sono molto contento. Insomma, secondo me è stato super divertente, abbiamo parlato di un sacco di cose interessanti e lui, è andato a gamba tesa su alcuni temi che a noi interessano tanto, semiotica o meno, di mezzo, ma direi con tanta semiotica di mezzo.
Sì, no, anch'io effettivamente il discorso semiotico è stato surrettiziamente presente e credo che non lo sia stato, diciamo, perché l'abbiamo insufflato noi, ma perché effettivamente aveva senso che fosse lì dentro. Newyorkese d'eccellenza, chiaramente, di quei newyorkesi che è un piacere ascoltare proprio al palato, ecco, questa è stata
ma sì, è come bersi veramente un bicchiere di vino stagionato ma totalmente palatabile, che va giù facilmente.
Esatto, con il tannino giusto. Kenneth Goldsmith con il tannino giusto. Gabriele, noi potremmo anche quindi salutare il nostro audience ricordandogli che questo era il penultimo episodio della stagione 2 o almeno della parte della stagione 2 nel 2020. In realtà loro già in qualche modo intuiranno che c'è un grande e laborioso progetto per il 2021, cioè Semio Boomer non si ferma fin quando il sangue scorrerà nelle nostre vene.
Esatto.
E quindi settimana prossima lascio a te l'onore.
Settimana prossima abbiamo un semiologo giovane che però sta facendo il dottorato in architettura, perché il mondo è sempre complicato e fatto di cose upside down. Quindi Francesco Di Maio, che ci parla, e noi lo stimoleremo a partire dalla sua curatela dell'edizione italiana di Dark Deleuze per i tipi di mimesis di Andrew Culp, un libro che io ancora non ho avuto l'ardire di ficcarmici dentro, e che però ho visto che ha sollevato già il proverbiale vespaio di cui parlava il mitico Wally Cometa di Gene Gnocchi 20 anni fa.
E ci lasciamo quindi con Wally Cometa di Gene Gnocchi. Vedremo la nostra immagine settimana prossima, tanto la nostra immagine tempo quanto la nostra immagine movimento, visto che di Deleuze si parlerà. Grazie a tutte, grazie a tutti. Vabbè, siamo rimasti in 2. Se prima eravamo in 3 a ballare
Esatto.
alle galli, adesso ce ne andiamo. 3, 2, sigla.